Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
We're going to have a great show to talk about this chaos that's been going on of recent. I mean, it has been crazy on how fast things have been changing regarding trade policies, regarding, government expenditures, regarding just different things in the world. And so we're going to get into that in just a second. But Lalo, anything you want to start off with before we get into this?
Just for reference, policies and announcements and everything we're hearing right now in the news and not necessarily just in the news. I mean, it's actually happening in DC. They're coming out so quickly and they're changing so quickly that as a show, as a podcast, we're trying to get these out as best and as timely as possible. But just for reference, just so that everybody knows, just for reference, this show is being recorded on Valentine's Day, on February 14th. And what we're going to talk about is as of this day, and we're going to try very hard to release it like a few days after. Speaking of which, I mean, I'm just really excited to have managed to create a good friendship here with a podcast with our next guest, in the sense that if you would have asked me 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago that we would have a podcast where we would have a consistent guest on our show that was in charge of the whole darn shebang, let's call it, of all of customs, I would have said, yeah, you're dreaming, dude. It's like, but anyway, but we're very privileged and honored to have Mr. Alan Bersin back on our show, as we had him multiple times, and looking forward to talking about trying to see his perspective on what is going on, and what if he was in the hot seat right now? What if he was the CBP Commissioner? What would be going on? How are things going to evolve, et cetera, and so I'm really excited for this because, I mean, we've had someone who's been there before. So,
yeah, thank you, Andy and Lalo, for your kind words. It's a friendship I prize, and it is an exciting time now for all the apparent chaos and the disruption. It is a time that is right up the alley of simply trade. I think it's a period of obvious change, but I think we're also dealing with a very sophisticated group of men and women who have been on the border and been in charge of managing trade for a while. And while the policies have been coming in a fast and furious pace, they haven't yet settled in. So I think the attitude at CBP is just steady as we go. We're adjusting to a new administration with a new set of priorities and a disruptive manner of implementing them. But it's something I think that's very exciting for many of the people and the professionals at CBP, as well as the pressure, the employee pressures that are being felt all over the government. Not so much, I think, being felt at CBP, where there's an understanding that both for migration management and trade management that you're going to need the people in place there. But I think it's an exciting period at CBP, but one in which many adjustments are going to have to be made.
Well, we should explore a little bit about that, what you just said, Alan, in that the proposed commissioner for CBP is the former chief of Border Patrol, correct?
Rodney Scott, yes.
Rodney Scott, yes, sir. And because of that, I mean, how do you see that? I mean, it seems like there's more emphasis on immigration than customs, or how are you looking at that?
So there's no question, Lalo, that this administration coming in as a result of the situation at the border in terms of migration has made that the essential priority for Customs and Border Protection, and indeed for all of the Department of Homeland Security for that matter. At the same time, this is an administration that is also very much geared to the trade environment, whether it's the tariff policies or the discussion of increased revenues. I think there's a real understanding that the blue shirts, right, the ports of entry at CBP are a critical part of the agency. So yes, no question that migration and the control of migration at the border is the top priority. But I don't think, certainly not in the way that it affected the country or the agency after 9/11, when trade really dropped off the agenda. I don't see that happening here.
Question: when I first reached out to you, I was very curious because I'm really bad about, and I have a hard time understanding, like when it comes to the government and laws and regulations and all. I mean, and just the way that the government really operates. You know, I'm pretty clueless on stuff like that. But I did reach out to you and I asked you about the proposed idea from President Trump on bringing the USTR under the Department of Commerce, a move that has also been done by former presidents, you know, trying to be done by former presidents, but it's always pushed back by Congress, especially because it seems to indicate that it's going to take away the tariff making powers or abilities from Congress and strip that away from them and moving it over to the Department of Commerce. So even as recent as I think yesterday, I believe if it was a press conference or something, somebody said that now that the Department of Commerce is responsible for that, which it's really technically not true, right? I mean, because it requires an act of Congress for that to become true, correct?
Typically, there is executive authority to issue and levy tariffs, but that is always based on a legislative authorization that's been given by Congress. But to your point of which agency, where agencies ought to be placed and who would have control, you're also right that Congress has tended over the years to be balkanized. That is, different committees have different relationships with different parts of the executive, and they try to protect that relationship so that they can influence policy. I think in terms of the reorganization that would coordinate what Commerce is doing and what USTR is doing, that President Trump is in a position to do that in the sense that the entire Congress is and the executive is aligned in terms of party allegiance. The Republicans control both houses of Congress. There is a majority on the Supreme Court that's attributable to President Trump's appointments. So I actually don't see this idea of reorganizing the deck chairs as being so critical, because as we're seeing in the way in which the administration has gotten started, they're operating by executive orders. What happens in the courts is yet to be seen across the board, but there's no real objection in Congress to this activity because of the loyalty, like it or not, of the leadership in both the House and the Senate to the Trump White House.
Correct. Yeah. And so I guess you bring up a really good point, because you said they're all executive orders and we're still yet to see what the courts are going to rule and everything. I mean, so I guess this is a very good point. We've had guests in the past couple of weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, since everybody started hearing about all these, executive orders, who have very wisely advised to not react to any of the tweets or the announcements, because it could very well mean that it's not going to happen, right? Or it'll happen in a very different way. I guess that that is almost what you're saying here also, is like they're pretty much executive orders doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to jump into them right away.
We've seen that it's both with regard to President Trump's style, which is to really exaggerate, make statements that seem outrageous, but you have to really get under them and understand what the problem is that he's addressing. So you've got to see that unfold, as, for example, in the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, imposed on day one, but suspended on day two, and as negotiations take over to see where, in fact, these deals will be made. But it's also, to your point, Lalo, the courts, which have take time. You can't get a lawsuit filed, and they can't be operating in the same pace that the president's been issuing executive orders. So I think we definitely want to wait to see what how the courts react, what the reaction of the White House is to adverse court rulings, and just steady as we go. The president was elected, many would argue, to do exactly what he's doing, which is to disrupt the way in which Washington was conducting business. Now, like that or not, unlike 2016, the president received a majority of the popular vote and an overwhelming victory in the Electoral College. So this is something that it's new and it's unsettling, but we should also seek to see what opportunities exist to get some things done that weren't possible in the past.
Let me ask you this. Because here at Global Training Center, obviously that's our job. That's what we do, is we do training. That's what our job is. And the reason Global Training Center exists is, obviously besides putting together this podcast, the main reason is the main revenue making part is to provide training and on all the rules, regulations, et cetera. So that's what we do day in, day out. But so here's a bunch of questions that people ask, which we have no real answer for, because I don't know what your opinion might be, but here's a really good one that we get asked. Because of Mexico and Canada potential tariffs coming in on March the 4th, I think that's the date. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it, March the 4th. They're asking, but that doesn't apply to my product if it applies to USMCA, correct? And we're like, no, it's erasing everything on USMCA, and we're going with a 25% tariff on any products coming in. What is your understanding on that? Is that even legal? Is that even correct? I know you're not a 100% lawmaker or anything like that, but what is your opinion on that?
So it's certainly not consistent with the spirit of the USMCA. The purpose of trade agreements like that was to reduce and eliminate tariffs and encourage trade. But again, Lalo, we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that those tariffs are coming into effect. If they are imposed by executive action, then they will supersede, in terms of enforcement in the U.S., they will supersede the provisions of the free trade agreements. There'll be lots of adverse political commentary on it. There'll be challenges, I'm sure, under the dispute resolution mechanisms in the agreement. There'll be other challenges, but that assumes that this is going to happen. And I would tend to project at this point, because I think President Trump, while he threatens the tariffs, it's a means in his mind to a different end, which would be to address issues, whether it's in the case of Mexico, organized crime and fentanyl, and migration cooperation, or whether reducing the surplus. Trade surplus between the countries. All of these things are the purposes. What President Trump's done that is so unsettling to so many people is that he's actually conflated trade with other issues, with non-trade issues, whether it's migration or control of fentanyl, and that's just the new fact of life. But I wouldn't jump to the conclusion and that this is going to be indeed what happens. I think much more likely we'll see a further series of agreements between Mexico and the United States on the one hand, and in different ways between Canada and the United States on the other. But what I would urge both Canada and Mexico to do is, rather than be entirely defensive, is to actually seize the initiative to put big ideas on the table, things that would help not only their country, but North America as a whole, and to really try to use this as an opportunity to negotiate all of those big ideas that in the past really wouldn't get to first base.
Yeah, and I see that what you said, and to Canada and Mexico's credit, I do see some effort in their side, right? I mean, like Mexico sent 10,000 troops to the border. Canada put together a plan where they're going to be spending, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the billions of dollars that they said they were going to be spending on border security, and trying to, tighten that up a little bit more. But I do like also. I know the president in Mexico. She's pretty sassy, and she's really trying to see this as, I know he's using this as a negotiating tactic. So let's see what we can do. That's the message I get from some of her speeches or whatever she might be talking, in any of her press conferences. So that's good news on that. So
yeah, but absolutely. But what I would say, Lalo, in the responses that you recorded that you referred to, yes, Mexico sent 10,000 troops. Canada's putting further border security issues in and appointing a fentanyl czar. But I'm talking about actually going beyond that, go beyond the ballpark that the president's defined and get to issues like, for example, pre-clearance. I mean, why not talk about why pre-clearance that would have a lot more cooperation between Mexican and U.S. customs on targeting. They could work together to keep Chinese precursors from coming into Mexico. But if you had this kind of cooperation between Mexican and Mexican border management agencies and CBP, I think what you'd see is a identification of many cases in which Mexico is not collecting duties that are due them because of misclassification. We could also then use this not only to develop trusted networks of traders, but we could pre-clear things at the factory floor and really use this as an opportunity to expedite lawful trade travel, both from Canada and Mexico into the U.S. and vice versa. So I'm saying go beyond the negotiating issues that the president set. Be responsive if you can. But there are big opportunities here to advance North American interests on both U.S. northern and southern borders.
You totally agree. Yeah, that's obviously, that's a really good perspective. That, of course, me and my my little bubble here, I'm not looking at. But that's why we have you on the show, Alan.
No, it's this is a disruptive time. Is difficult. We human beings don't like change, but this is a time in which you have to look at the possibilities in which we can accomplish big things, and Canada and the United States and Mexico and the United States have huge shared interests. They're our largest trade partners now. We all have an interest in properly monitoring Chinese penetration of the U.S. Of the North American trade production corridors. This is an area where we can cooperate, and we ought to, frankly, for the benefit of North America and each of its core countries.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And what about China? I mean, they're the third most mentioned here in tariffs and everything. Do you feel that our communication with them is similar to what maybe Trump and his administration are trying to get out of Mexico and Canada, or is that like a whole different ballgame? I mean,
yeah, I think the situation between the U.S. relationship with China and the U.S. relationship in North America are quite different. In fact, over the last generation, the rise of China has been in many ways the most remarkable transformation that's taken place in world history. A lot of that rise under Deng Xiaoping was done in a peaceful method with an idea of growing and becoming more a lead economy, to be sure, but also to do so in concert with existing world order. It's become clear under Xi Jinping, I think, that China is a rising power, and the challenge that it raises to the U.S., one that both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, perhaps the only thing they agreed on from 2016 on, is that China has become a country that needs to be countered. Now, that doesn't mean that we should seek to contain the rise of China. It is definitely a huge factor in world affairs and will be. In fact, it's only been in the last 200 years that China was on its back for most of world history because of the size of its population. It had the largest economy in the world, and it has a place in the world that we should not see as something we want to contain. What we do want to do, I think, though, is we do want to redress the imbalance that's existed as the West, particularly the United States, helped China increase its and carry off the economic miracle that's taken place there. We haven't seen the reciprocal openness on the part of China to opening up its market to the United States or the West in ways that would be reciprocal. We haven't seen the kind of respect for intellectual property that needs to be built into any self-respecting or mutually self-respecting relationship. The big challenge, Lalo, of the next generation, in my mind, is how do we keep the trade competition, what is definitely going to be a competitive situation between the United States and China, from degenerating into a diplomatic and military conflict between the two countries. That would be a catastrophe for both countries and the world. But there's definitely the need to reshape the way in which we've been dealing with China trade policy.
Yeah, totally agree on you on that. On the any military implications that might bring, especially when you also factor in the situation with Taiwan and how we want to protect that, and China insists on taking that over as well. And I guess we certainly see that a lot also with other territories, like what's going on in Israel and Gaza and going on with Russia and Ukraine, just figuring out what they're going to do with territories. But let me just jump into this also, and let me ask you on. You kind of talked about, or you're discussing a little bit about I'm having trouble with the word reciprocity, or the reciprocal of trade, of tariffs, us matching what others are doing to us and everything. If Andy were here, and by the way, everybody, apologize, Andy did start the show, and for some reason, either his internet went out or something happened, and he just dropped off, and apologies for that. But if Andy were here, he would probably be bringing up the fact that, how U.S. products are not treated equally or fairly throughout the world. Not going to go into all those details or anything other than the understanding that we all understand and know that is a fact. So recently there was and remind me what it was. It was either a proposal or an investigation of for us to look at how we can address that and do the reciprocal tariffs, correct? Is that what, I think that was just announced yesterday or something by President Trump?
Yeah, well, listen, I think we learned ever since the Depression and the experience that we had with the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 that tariffs should be avoided if at all possible. That in fact, free trade, which has fueled globalization, mostly for the good, although there've been downsides to be sure, has been very beneficial for millions and millions of people in the world have benefited from globalization. It's been uneven, and that's part of what we have to address going forward. And I think what President Trump is seeking to address. But tariffs and retaliatory tariffs are actually not a good development if you can avoid it. What President Trump, I think, is saying is that if there are imbalances in the trade, if a country's market is not open, or if regulations are such that U.S. producers and businesses don't have equal opportunities of access, then that's not going to be tolerated, and there will be tariffs placed on goods imported into this country. But again, that I hope and I think the main intent is to cause changes in the way in which countries treat U.S. business, rather than for the sake simply of punishing other countries. That remains to be seen, and we need to see this play out. It's going to be much more complicated, in my view, to accomplish this with China than it is with North America and even with Europe. The recent round of the tariffs has been articulated or directed to the EU, to the European Union. But steady as we go, Lalo. Let's wait to see what the reactions are, and businesses will have to react. But I don't think it's going to be from one day to the next. I think we're going to see a long series of negotiations with China, and we'll see how the leaders, policy makers, actually resolve this and avoid something that would be mutually self-destructive.
Well, okay, so now let me go back to my original statement that I said, let's pretend, or let's say you were in the hot seat right now. You were the one, and you're the commissioner today. We all know CBP's job is not to make policy, but to enforce it, correct? Okay, so because of that, what would your strategy, or what would you be thinking right now? I mean, you are looking at enforcing, and this is very close and dear to you because of your relationship with like Altana and forced labor, than you being in China quite often, actually. So enforcement of forced labor, enforcement of like now de minimis, right? I mean, because now that is coming in. What about the steel and aluminum tariffs now going down to a point where even if my product is not evident that it's classified under steel or aluminum, let's say this mouse here, but let's say this mouse has some steel or aluminum, I'm going to be taxed or tariff on the what is aluminum or steel. So now we're talking about several level deeps of tracing that product and making sure that you're declaring what is steel is, so you can pay tariffs. At least that's the way I understand it. And sorry if I'm misinterpreting that. So what I'm trying to say is, now you're looking at a workforce that you currently have, that you have geared up to maybe enforce whatever you thought you were going into, but now you have 2 or 3 times the work. Where do you feel is the focus in now? Like, where's the enforcement going to be? Where is it? Like, what? I guess I just kind of want to pick your brain and see what do you feel you might be doing today? I mean, obviously trying to hire more people, but I mean, but then there's also the Elon Musk and Trump idea of reducing the federal workforce. So I mean, how is this going to all work into it? I mean, I guess again, let's look into your little crystal ball of what would you think might be doing.
So this is the kind of scenario planning that the agency goes through. I think pretty routinely when faced with policy changes. What's different now is you're getting a large number of potential policy changes, none of which have yet been finalized, so to speak. You've got a lot of motion, but not a lot of things that have yet been set for implementation. But CBP's become very sophisticated on the trade front in understanding which ports of entry actually handle which imports, what the nature of the business of the major ports are, what the Port of Long Beach does, what the Port of New York and New Jersey does at Port Elizabeth, what Savannah does, what Houston does. I mean, all of this, we have teams that have been organized to deal with very different products being brought into different places in the country. We have centers of excellence that have become quite proficient in understanding this. So I think the organization is capable of being able to organize and be prepared to implement responses as these policies actually take shape and are implemented. There will be lag times, to be sure, in the same way that it took probably a year and a half before the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act was being enforced regularly by Customs and Border Protection. But Lalo, this is the agency's developed a certain capacity to deal with this. The planning can be done on a regional basis and on a port-by-port basis in ways that I think will be responsive to the needs when these policies are actually implemented. And we know what the policy landscape looks like with a lot more certainty than we do today.
Great. Yeah. So that was more like on my, the reason I was asking is just to take a look at that and how, like what the future challenges might be, what are current challenges. And I mean, it perfectly answered. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's just, again, it piques my curiosity in trying to figure out, so how are we going to like address all this, and a lot of us, prepare for, okay, this is a plan. We're going to, we now know that we saw last year in 2024 that there was a dramatic increase in like forced labor enforcements. And is that going to continue or is it going to diminish? Things like that, how is both the industry and, government going to prepare for any of these new challenges? Alan, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I mean, do you feel we might have missed anything or that we should cover? And well, how do you feel that if you have any other final statements or anything that you might want to make?
Yeah. So two points in terms of change. The largest challenge will come if, in fact, the minimis changes are made permanent and are implemented. That's been the largest change, I think, in the trade world over the last number of years, Lalo. We now see coming into the United States, 4 million packages a day are being, small packages a day are coming in. And if the de minimis rules are changed, which apparently I think they will be and should be in some ways, both to prevent fraud and abuse, but also to monitor more what's being shipped into the country without manifests, without a whole lot of information. that's going to take a major change at Customs and Border Protection and in the trade community, where we start to see requirements that packages be identified, at least if not with a full manifest, but at least with enough information to permit CBP to make judgments about the risk that the package may present. So I think that's a big change, and one that the agency has been confronted with, and I think is working on. And then the second point that I would make is that this agency is very, very critical to the trade world, and it's improved dramatically in its communication with the private sector. I think, if you look over the last decade, the communication that takes place between the private sector and the regulators at CBP and elsewhere has increased dramatically in the CBP context. That needs to continue. I think what we're going to see over the next phase, regardless of what becomes, what policies actually are ultimately implemented, is that we have to get away from the adversarial relationship on the American side between the public and private sectors. We need to see a new cooperation. We need to move away from the gotcha attitude in terms of trade enforcement. And this is, I think, a major long-term shift that CBP is moving toward, and the private sector as well. So just to wrap up, I'd say in the short term, the biggest challenge is going to be in the e-commerce and the small package business faced by CBP. And in the midterm and the long term, it's moving from a adversarial relationship to a cooperative one in which the roles of both regulator and regulated are respected, but there's a lot more communication between these major actors in the public and private sectors.
Okay, yeah, and I do see a little bit on that second point that you made. I do see a little bit more of that. I mean, we, as a podcast, are even being reached out by CBP to come on and talk about certain, just points, or I mean, like on forced labor, or even the continuing education requirement, things like that. And they do want to do more public outreach, and thank goodness for that, because I would love nothing more than to have government people also on my podcast to be the front line on communicating this information to folks, and at the same time, I don't know if you're going to be at the what do they call it now? Trade Summit, I guess they call it in May.
Yeah, no, I will. I haven't been there in a couple of years, but this would be a very important year to be there, because by May, we're going to start seeing some of these policies will take shape because decisions will have been made following the negotiations, and CBP will be right in the vortex of all of these changes.
Yeah, exactly. So. For anybody listening, it's not, the details are still not out, other than it'll be in May, first week in May, I believe, like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or something like that. Apologies if those are not the dates, but it is the first week in May. It is in New Orleans, but there's still no formal way of registering, and there's no formal way of booking your rooms or anything like that. But I kind of brought that up only, Alan, because that I feel is also a way how CBP is reaching out and doing that public outreach. They invite, like, for example, they invited us to possibly moderate or be part of the presenters, which historically, like you said, it was more government talking to you and telling you what they're doing, and not collaborating in that sense. But it has changed a lot. Personally, I see it that way. I mean, whether somebody else sees it a different way or not, apologies, but that's what I'm seeing. That's how it's working out on my end, and it's looking good to that extent. But Good points there. And Alan, well, thank you. I mean, I can't thank you enough. I mean, we always say this, we can spend a couple hours talking to you, and hopefully if we see you at the trade symposium, maybe I'll grab a seat with you and turn on the camera and we'll talk, and we'll get others like Cindy Allen or, some of your former colleagues to just sit around in a table and just talk. That would be a really interesting conversation, just to hit the recorder and see what we can grab. But if we do see you out there, that'd be amazing. So, but anyway, thank you again. You're always so grateful with your time or generous. I'm sorry. You're always so generous with your time, and we really appreciate that. And I know you're traveling abroad, so hopefully you continue to enjoy your time out traveling outside the country.
Will do, Lalo, and thank you for the service you and Andy provide.
Thank you, sir. You have a great afternoon and safe travels. And again, hopefully we'll see you soon in person.